Morning motivation with Joe, so this is what it is. Hey, as a community, bro, we got to show up for our people, bro.
People don't just disappear from joy into death overnight. And when they do, it leaves questions that refuse to stay quiet. Tonight, I want you to sit with me for a moment, because this story isn't just about how Tyrone Davis Jr. died. It's about everything that doesn't add up around his final days. Before we go any further, like this video, subscribe to Crime Files, and click the bell icon so you don't miss what mainstream media ignores. Stories like Tyrone's fade when people stop paying attention, and silence helps no one. Now, let's talk about Tyrone Davis Jr. Tyrone wasn't just a name floating around social media after his death. He was a person with energy, humor, and a presence people felt. Online, many knew him as StepDaddyDro. He was expressive, loud in the best way, emotional when it mattered, and unafraid to show personality. The kind of guy who made people feel like they knew him personally, even if they'd never met him a day in their lives. He shared his life openly. The laughs, the jokes, the confidence, the relationships. He wasn't perfect, and he didn't pretend to be. That honesty is part of why people connected to him so deeply. Tyrone had supporters who genuinely rooted for him, who checked for his posts, who felt his absence immediately when he went quiet. And then came the trip, a holiday getaway that was supposed to be about rest, connection, and celebration. Christmas time, a period that's meant to feel warm and safe. Tyrone went on this trip with someone he trusted, someone close to him, someone many viewers had already seen in his life before. Nothing about the plan suggested danger. No warnings, no public fear, no goodbyes that sounded final. But somewhere during that trip, something changed. Communication slowed, then stopped. And for someone as active as Tyrone, that silence was loud, very loud. What followed wasn't a clear explanation or a comforting update. It was confusion, rumors, disturbing claims. People online started asking the same question you're probably asking right now. What really happened to Tyrone Davis Jr.? Because the details that began to surface didn't sound like an accident. They didn't sound simple. They sounded messy, emotional, and unresolved. Words like argument, injury, abandon, and head trauma started circulating. None of it has been officially confirmed. All of it is deeply unsettling. Now let's slow this down, because the truth usually hides in the spaces people rush past. Tyrone's relationship was not invisible to the public. If you followed him, you'd seen moments of affection, moments of tension, moments that felt real. And that's important, because real relationships are complicated. Love isn't just laughter and matching outfits. Sometimes it's jealousy. Sometimes it's control. Sometimes it's silence after an argument that never really ends. People close to Tyrone describe him as emotional but loyal, the type who loved hard and trusted deeply. And that kind of trust can become dangerous when it's placed in the wrong hands. I want you to think about that for a second. How many times have we seen someone ignore red flags because they believed love would fix it? During the trip, reports from social media claim there was an argument, not a small disagreement, something serious enough to change the direction of that night. Again, I need to be clear with you. These are allegations shared by family members and people close to the situation, not official statements. But when multiple voices tell similar stories, it's hard not to listen. The story goes that emotions escalated. Voices were raised. And at some point, Tyrone was injured. Some say he was struck in the head. Others say he was already disoriented. What's consistent across the claims is this part. Tyrone was not okay. And here's where things become deeply disturbing. Instead of immediate help, instead of a hospital visit, instead of calling authorities or family, Tyrone was allegedly left alone, left behind, in an unfamiliar area, injured, vulnerable. Imagine that. Put yourself there for a moment. You're hurt, confused, possibly concussed, and the person you came with is gone. What do you do? What could you do? That question sit heavy, because whatever happened next ended with Tyrone losing his life. When news of his death began spreading, there was no clear timeline, no official explanation released to calm the public, just fragments, shock, anger, and grief pouring out from people who loved him and people who only knew him through a screen. Family members went online demanding answers. Not closure. Answers. That difference matters. Closure comes after truth, and truth was nowhere to be found. Why wasn't there immediate transparency? Why did it feel like this story was being buried instead of investigated? Those questions fueled outrage. People began digging. Old videos were rewatched. Comments were analyzed. Behavior was questioned. Suddenly, moments that once seemed harmless took on a darker tone. And when that happens, it's hard to turn it off. Your mind keeps asking, was this preventable? After Tyrone's death, the atmosphere shifted. And I want you to really sit with this part, because this is where things stop feeling accidental and start feeling uncomfortable. People expected grief to look a certain way. Shock, tears, silence, maybe cooperation with authorities. But what many viewers noticed didn't match what they expected. Online activity became a focal point. Posts were deleted. Comments were turned off. Statements were vague or avoided entirely. And when questions were asked directly, answers didn't come. Now, let me be clear with you. Everyone grieves differently. There is no rule book for pain. But when a death happens under unclear circumstances, silence doesn't feel like privacy. It feels like avoidance. Family members began speaking out more publicly. Their tone wasn't just sadness. It was frustration, confusion, anger. They weren't mourning quietly. They were demanding to know why Tyrone didn't get help, why no one stepped in, why someone he trusted was the last person with him. Think about that for a second. If someone you loved was injured during an argument, would your first instinct be to walk away or to protect them? That question is at the center of this entire case. As days passed, more people began sharing stories, not official reports, personal experiences, patterns, claims of controlling behavior, emotional volatility. Again, allegations, not proven facts. But when enough people describe similar energy, similar warning signs, it creates a pattern that's hard to ignore. And here's where tension really starts to rise. There was no immediate public confirmation of how Tyrone died, no clear medical explanation released, no transparent timeline. And when authorities don't speak quickly, the public fills in the gaps, sometimes unfairly, sometimes accurately, but always loudly. Social media turned into an investigation board. Videos were stitched together. Old arguments were reanalyzed. Tone of voice, body language, past captions. People started asking whether Tyrone had been emotionally isolated, whether he felt trapped, whether the relationship had shifted from love to something darker. There's always a moment in stories like this when grief turns into suspicion, not because people want drama, but because the puzzle pieces refuse to fit. For Tyrone supporters, that moment came when timelines started conflicting. Different versions of the same night began circulating. The argument, the injury, the separation, the delay in seeking help. Each retelling felt incomplete, like someone was intentionally skipping chapters. And when stories change, people notice, especially online, where nothing ever truly disappears. What troubled many viewers wasn't just what was said, but what wasn't. Why wasn't there an immediate call for help? Why was Tyrone allegedly left alone while injured? Why did it take so long for clear information to surface? These weren't questions coming from strangers looking for gossip. They were coming from people who had watched Tyrone for years, who knew his patterns, his energy, his voice. People who could tell when something didn't sound like him. Then came a behavioral shift that made everything feel heavier. Instead of openness, there was distance. Instead of explanation, there was defensiveness. And again, grief can explain some of that. But grief doesn't explain contradictions. Grief doesn't explain avoidance. At the same time, family members continue to speak with urgency. Their message stayed consistent. Tyrone didn't deserve to die like this. Whatever happened, he should have received help. He should not have been left alone. That statement alone became the emotional breakpoint for many people. Because even if you remove every rumor, every allegation, every theory, that one fact remains. An injured man was allegedly not helped. And that changes everything. This is where the story stops being about a tragic death and starts being about responsibility. You don't have to prove intent to question actions. And that's what viewers began doing. Not accusing, questioning, asking why certain choices were made when better ones were available, asking how love turns into abandonment in a single night. Then something else happened. Public pressure grew. The more people talked, the harder it became to ignore. Posts demanding justice spread faster. Tyrone's name stopped being whispered and started being said out loud, over and over again. People weren't letting the story fade quietly anymore. And here's the twist that many didn't expect. The silence itself became the loudest evidence. Because when there is nothing to hide, clarity usually comes quickly. But when answers are delayed, people begin to wonder what those delays are protecting. A person? A reputation? A narrative? Think about this with me. If everything that happened was unavoidable, accidental, and handled correctly, wouldn't transparency help? Wouldn't facts bring peace? Instead, the lack of clarity deepened the wound. Tyrone's death stopped feeling like a closed chapter. It felt like a book slammed shut mid-sentence. And that's where we are right now. A young man gone, a family grieving, a public demanding truth, and a case that feels unfinished. When stories like Tyrone Davis Jr. reach this point, they stop being about timelines and start living in the mind. Because unanswered questions don't disappear. They linger. They replay. They follow you long after the screen goes dark. Tyrone didn't just lose his life. He lost his voice. And when someone can no longer speak for themselves, the responsibility quietly shifts to everyone still watching. Think about it. How many people have died with their final moments misunderstood, oversimplified, or completely erased? How many times has silence been mistaken for closure? What makes this case heavy is not just the loss, but the choices surrounding that loss. Choices made in moments of anger. Choices made under pressure. Choices made when help was still an option. And that's where psychology enters the room. What happens to a person when they feel emotionally cornered? How does fear change decision-making in the heat of conflict? At what point does self-preservation turn into neglect? These aren't questions meant to accuse. They're questions meant to understand human behavior. Because tragedy rarely announces itself. It builds quietly through moments people later wish they could redo. Another thing worth sitting with is this. Why do some deaths receive immediate attention while others barely get a headline? Is it status? Is it image? Or is it simply that discomfort makes people look away? Tyrone's story forces us to confront how quickly a life can be reduced to rumors instead of facts. How someone vibrant can become a mystery instead of a memory honored with truth. And maybe the most uncomfortable question of all is this one. If Tyrone had been helped immediately, if someone had chosen compassion over conflict, would we even be having this conversation right now? That question doesn't accuse anyone directly, but it does demand reflection, because every choice creates a ripple, and some ripples end lives. So let me ask you honestly, when someone you love is hurt, do you walk away or do you stay? When emotions run high, do you choose control or care? And if you were gone tomorrow, would your story be told clearly, or would others be left arguing over pieces of you online? These are the questions cases like this leave behind. They don't come with easy answers, but they deserve to be asked. If you believe Tyrone Davis Jr.'s story deserves attention, if you believe silence should never win over truth, then don't just watch and move on. Like this video. Subscribe to Crime Files. Click the bell icon so you don't miss the stories that need voices.